Hi everyone, welcome to California, Northern California to be exact, where our skies are smoky because there are fires going on, it seems like all the time these days. Meanwhile though, the gardening goes on and I'm here, Kim here by the way, to take you on the October garden tour. Some of the beds might look empty, but they're not. They've all got seedlings growing in them. Some of them are just tiny right now. I have taken out a lot as I prepare for either mulching certain beds or bringing in the transplants that I seeded in other shadier, cooler places. Fall is a time that, though I like to start experimenting with some cool crops, which I've never really done until this year and a little bit last year, but it's also the time when I really like to focus on planting perennial crops. So more kale and collards, more asparagus, more artichoke, that kind of thing. I'm also really excited because I have some flower bulbs coming soon. No, they're not part of the veggie garden, but they're part of my life here on this simple living homestead I've got going. So I have tulips and iris and lots and lots of dahlias coming my way soon. Well, all right, let's get going on this tour. Meanwhile, the zinnias just go on and on and on. I just love the look of this bed now that I've got the huge squash that were here out. I had a large zucchini squash here and a big Burgess buttercup down there that had basically gone every which way into all the pathways and was going crazy. And it was starting to frustrate me because it was getting invaded with some kind of sticky, I don't know, some sticky thing, disease, bugs. I'm not even sure what it was, but pulling it out was great for my morale. And here I've got some Sugar Rush peach peppers coming up. And here, so hopefully they have time to do well. It's nice and warm now. Let's see how fast they grow. Those pepper plants did not like our summer, but are really enjoying September and October. And that's a big Bertha there, and looks like I need to get those off. And the one next to it has been producing as well. It's a gypsy, and it's got a lot more blossoms on it, so we'll see how much more it can give me. This is an interesting cherry tomato plant that my dad brought over that I don't even know the name. The name was really long and strange. I'd never heard of it before. And like all the tomatoes, it did not like super hot heat and the smoke we had, but now is looking really good. So we'll see what comes of that. Here I've got my merit tree, can't even talk today, merit tree collard, and it's doing well. I still need to take that side branch off. It's getting lower and lower, and I will do that. I've been pruning a lot of things though. Some have been more urgent than that one. And here I've got mustard growing, as well as a few snapdragons. I've got some mums about to burst into bloom there, and other kinds of flowers, more mums. Over here some agastache and some snapdragons. Now over here I've got a cabbage as well as onions, walking onions, and this really huge ugly zucchini. But it keeps producing zucchini. I just pulled a big one off yesterday, so I'm letting it go until it stops producing zucchini. Now this is the Amish pie squash, which I've cut all the way back, other than this one vine of leaves I've left growing to feed this Amish pie squash, but it's done. I need to cut it off and figure out how in the world I'm gonna use it. It's kind of weird shaped. Look at it down there. I don't know. It's kind of strange. Now, here is my merit tree collard that looked like a bonsai 2 weeks ago because I had pruned it so much. And it already has filled in tremendously in 2 weeks. And also, the leaves have gotten twice as big as they were. I had a couple of little caterpillars on here, as you can see, but I've been picking them off, and I didn't find any yesterday or today, so I think I may have got them all. But these leaves are just getting huge, and that's because I pruned a ton back, so it has a lot more energy for the rest what remains, and it has been occasionally cooler, off and on cooler, which it likes. And then anything I have to prune off because of bug damage or because it's just older, my ducks and chickens absolutely adore. So that's why I love growing merit collard, because not only is it great to eat in the winter because it's perennial here, but the ducks and chickens absolutely love it. And then also it makes fabulous compost and compost tea. So this is my ground cherries, which I wasn't even going to grow this year. I grew so many last year and nobody really liked them except my oldest son who doesn't live here. But they came up as volunteers in several places, as they do. And I discovered that this year I actually like the things. You know, they grow and fall to the ground when they're ripe. They're hard to open with one hand, but you take the little husk off and they're on the inside and they have this yummy taste that I didn't think was yummy last year. But now that I know what to expect, it's grown on me. It's kind of this tangy, tart thing. So I've heard they make great preserves, and I might try that actually, because now I can understand and kind of see how that might be. So yeah, something for me to try. This is a Jimmy Nardello pepper that did horrible all year, but is sending out new growth now. So hey, maybe it's going to do something now. That's another Amish pie squash that I have to figure out what to do with. And over there I have a variety of, basically that's dinosaur kale that I feed to the ducks, and some mint and more dinosaur kale and more merit collards and some experimental seeds I've got going. And some flowers that are suffering in the heat, but they'll come back. And some Mexican gherkins, some cucamelons is what those are, that trailing vine. And that is, oh, that's a cutting from a merit tree collard, and it has obviously taken, and I say that because you can see the new growth coming out there in the middle. So this was just a cutting I took when a branch broke off or I needed to prune it, and it has grown really well. If you watched, I have a couple of videos where I had to prune things back, including the merit collard down there at the end of that row. I pruned that extensively, and I got about 30 cuttings off of it, which I'll show you in a second. Purple tree kale is looking as awesome as ever. So delicious. Thought I'd show you my elderberry bushes. They look, well, to me they look great. They might look a little strange to you guys because there's so little leaves on them, but these actually were the result of a desperate experiment, and I'm putting up a video about them tomorrow. But I moved them from the front area of my property where rabbits continued to decimate them. They would leaf out fully, and they were much bigger than this. You see where this one is way up high, these two branches? Well, both plants had branches that tall and taller, full of leaves, every branch, even blossoming back in May and June, trying to produce berries. And they actually, I think I even saw a couple of very tiny berries on them at that point. But the rabbits down front decimated them. And I keep using that word decimated because that's exactly what they did. I'd come out in the morning and every single leaf would be gone. And then they leafed out again a few weeks later. Then the rabbits did it again. Every leaf gone. That happened 3 times. And then I finally said that enough's enough, and I moved them despite a lot of people telling me I shouldn't. And anyway, you can check that video out if you like. But as you can see, they have survived. And next year I'm going to have elderberries, and I'm really happy about that. So I put some red salvia in my blueberry bush bed that had the smallest blueberry plants. I figure when they get bigger like the other blueberries, I can always take the salvia out and move it elsewhere, but salvia, just make it look prettier and fill it out. I'm surprised that the gazanias are still open. They usually don't open until they're in full sun, so mid-morning, like around 10, and then they usually close up in the evening pretty soon. They usually stay open this late. I mean, it's not that late. It's probably about 6, but it feels later because of the haze keeping the sun from shining intensely as it usually does at this time. So this is my little narrow flower bed next to the steps here, and I pulled all the corn I had here, the popcorn, that was glass gem corn, out yesterday. And I had got 3 or 4 ears out of it, so that was fun. I wasn't really growing it for the corn. I was growing it more for the look of the corn itself, the tassels and the colors in the silks and such. Not the silk. What is that other stuff called? The tassels, I always call it, but I'm not sure if that's the technical term. But with glass gem corn, those are kind of a gold and maroon, so I really like that look. Anyway, I took them out, so now I'm going to plant something there. I'm not sure if I'm going to put flowers there which I have plenty of flower starts that I've done, or lettuce. If I wait for like 4 weeks, I could put lettuce there. I don't know, I have to think about that. Meanwhile, I have alyssum and some orange gazanias. I love gazanias. They're just so prolific. They spread everywhere, and in zones 9 to 11, they're perennial, and they're all different colors. Some yarrow, more alyssum, white and purple, and some osteospermum that's grown really big this year. This is kind of funny. Everything in this row is in the ground, and this is in a pot. And that's on accident. I set this pot here one day and meaning to come back and plant it later that day. And like a week later, I was like, oh my goodness, I never planted those. So I went over to plant them and it had already rooted. So I just left it because I didn't want to damage it. So it's in a little tiny pot under there. You can't even see it probably, but it's in a little pot. It does make watering easier. I just watered directly into that pot. And this is another purple tree kale that has come back to life. I transplanted it here, and it was in a shady spot in the olive orchard and did not do well there, although the squirrels appreciated it there and they ate every single leaf off. When I planted it here, it was basically a stalk with like 3 leaves on it. And it's been here now, I don't know, like 4 weeks, maybe 5 at the most, but I think only about 4. And it has just done beautifully well. It's in line with the purple tree kale at the top of the steps. You can see the other one on the right of the steps, and that one is much shorter. That's because if you watched my most previous video about the wind damage, that one had several branches break off that I've turned into cuttings now. But I'm really not worried about it because these shoot up so tall in the winter. Their leaves get huge and they shoot up, oh, easily 8 feet. So I'll just eventually, you know, by January, prune them all to be the same height at about 6 feet. This is one crate full of purple tree kale cuttings. You can definitely see where it gets its name now. Not only are a lot of its leaves tinged with purple, but its stem is very purple most of the time. So hoping some of those take off. If even a few do, that will make wonderful new plants. These are merit tree collard cuttings that I took off of that large bonsai-like merit tree collard out there that I showed you. So these are about 3 or 4 weeks old, and they have most of them rooted. So in another few weeks I'll be potting those up, probably to give away a lot. So the bean plants in the little pot are coming up nicely. The bok choy behind it continues to do well, and I continue to harvest from it. You just keep harvesting the lower leaves and it keeps sitting out new ones. I have another plant that's been going for months and super tall now. And the beans have all come up in my crates against the trellis here, so that's good. And I'm going to be able, kiwi's looking good too. I'm going to be able to plant a few more things. I need to turn that around and plant something in that section. Yeah, now see, something got these lower leaves here. Not throwing that leaf away, that makes great compost, but it doesn't need those leaves. It doesn't need to support them right now. It can concentrate on the healthy ones. That's looking really good. So I'm going to be weaving these bean plants as they get taller into the trellis that I've put behind the rails here. These are royalty purple pod beans, runner beans. So looking forward to that. They've done really well coming up. And again, I'm going to plant something in the front of these. I'm not sure what. Actually, probably more bok choy. Yeah, because it does so well here. So in the long bed here, the yellow pear tomatoes are still doing all right. They look kind of sparse and scrawny, but they're still producing, so I'm leaving them for now. And my walking onions that I planted a few months ago are still doing nicely and coming up. I'll insert a photo of the gazanias when they're in bloom because they don't open until the sun comes fully out, but I have a bunch of gazanias planted in here that are all different colors and gorgeous. I've got some okra back there. Mainly though, I'm leaving this bed empty because I'm going to plant some parsnips in here, I think. That or onions, I have to decide. So I have garlic and onions coming next week, I think I mentioned, and I have to decide where to put them. And parsnips, I just need to find a place where they do well and that my cats don't dig them up because that's been happening. The lime tree's looking good. This bed's doing well. It's full of broccoli plants there along the side and down here. Got some rudbeckia and snapdragons in the middle, as well as a little fig tree cutting. And a row of walking onions from one side to the other. They're pretty small, but if you get down there, you can see them all coming up. And there we have a cabbage and some mustard there and there. More snapdragons. A melon plant that doesn't want to die, so I'm just leaving it for now. Another yellow pear tomato and more mustard. Wow, isn't that color gorgeous? Really, really pretty dark pink. And here's the jungle corner of the garden, still looking like a jungle. So I've got my lemongrass right up there, tall and proud, and boy does that make wonderful tea. And then I have yellow pear tomatoes everywhere, which I actually see some of them starting to turn yellow, and that's a first. So maybe my idea that they didn't like the weather being 110, 115 is true, because now that it's gone down to 90s most days, they are starting to turn yellow. Again, it's not a lot of them turning yellow, so I don't know. This is the shadiest corner of the place in that it gets sun from about 10 to about 3. That's only 5 hours. It gets filtered sun off and on the rest of the day, but full sun only about 5 hours. So we'll see what happens. This vine is one of the few left. Well, there's two there. One going that way and one going over there, coming out of this little 3-gallon container. There were 10 or 12 vines, but really only this huge Amish pie squash and the one over there, both of which I can take now and figure out what to do with them because I have no clue. They're really all that came of that. There is a little one right in there. Where, see that? That's about the size of a small bowling ball. We'll see if it gets any bigger, but that's what that did. This is my favorite cherry tomato. It doesn't look like much, and I did let it just sprawl, but mostly because the vines of this Amish pie squash were all throughout it. See, we've still got the ash on the leaves here. That's because we still have fires going on. But this cherry tomato that tastes so wonderful, and it's sending out new green growth and new tomatoes. I may try to prop this all up here actually, now that I can get to it. This is sun sugar tomatoes, and I love the flavor. More yellow pear tomatoes. We're still in that corner of the garden, just a little bit away from my jungle corner. And these are ripening at a quicker rate than the ones over there. And then I have some green onions, Egyptian walking onions, some rudbeckia, and a new plant, a Jimmy Nardello pepper, which is blossoming. Let's hope it takes off in this hot but slightly cooler weather. So this looks vastly different than it did a few weeks ago, because this was the bed that I had an Amish pie squash. There's the Amish pie squash there. Delicata squash, which produced dozens and dozens of wonderful delicatas. And this amaranth that was like 6 feet tall and 10 feet wide and was sending its vines, which I didn't realize it was even vining. It's not technically, but it acted like a vine. And it sent its growth into that bed over there, and it sent it totally across this pathway. I could not get through this pathway to access my herb beds there without climbing over them or twisting my way in and out. It was very difficult. So I cut this way back, and this was like, well, you can see it was like a huge tree, and this was only half of it. It had broken off earlier. Right there you can see where it was even bigger. Anyway, I cut it way back. I did leave some because it's just pretty, isn't it? I like the fall color, so I left that. It's controllable now. It's just a little plant. And then over here I have some little pots planted with new seeds, and I have some things coming up. So I have, that's a purple sprouting broccoli, but do you see all those little red, let me get one. Yeah, these little red seedlings, you know what those are, don't you? Yeah, exactly, amaranth. So the thing is, it is a beautiful plant, as you saw in previous videos if you watched any of them. Gorgeous, really, but it will send up seedlings everywhere. So you have to take them out or you're going to be growing amaranth everywhere, which is, you know, it's not a terrible thing, but, you know, if you want to grow other things, you can't let it take over everywhere. So we have a yellow squash, crookneck squash there. I need to harvest that one. This plant, you wouldn't believe it's coming out of that pot, would you? It's right on the edge, and somehow it's still surviving. It's already, of course, done a lot of production over the last 2 months. So it's hanging on and producing a little bit more, and then I'll cut it out. I've already taken out almost all the squash on the property. All the zucchini, I think, is out. There might be one. Oh, there's one left over there that I see. But, well, hi, baby. Have you come to visit? Have you come to visit? You always seem to do that on the garden tours, huh? Hello. So here we have the herb beds. Bee balm there on the end. I cut back all the blossoming branches finally, and it's looking so healthy. That makes a delicious tea. Some violas down there. They're so beautiful. They're perennial here in Zone 9B. A random tomato. Highly doubt that will do anything, but maybe. Tricolor sage, which I'm going to be using more and more this winter. And I like to use it in soups and stews. My oregano plant that refuses to let go of its gorgeous blooms. Isn't that lovely? I just let it bloom because I can get oregano leaves from it down lower, lots of new growth. And I have other oregano plants too. The sorrel, doing wonderful. Also going to use that more in soups and stews as fall progresses. I also found out the chickens absolutely adore sorrel. That's probably their favorite green, I think. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you enjoying that patch of sun? Had so little sun here lately because of the smoke causing gray and red hazes. That's winter savory, also wonderful for spicing up your soups. My little basil tree that I've done pretty well this year in pinching off the flowers before they become flowers, so it has stayed alive and providing me with lots of ongoing basil. Now these are borage seedlings because I had a big borage plant here last spring and I took it out. It got so huge. The cat is bumping my hand. It got so huge, it was overtaking the walkway, so I took it out, but it produced lots of little seedlings. And borage is great for your garden. It makes a wonderful chop and drop mulch full of nutrients for the soil and the plants that it mulches. And also, it has beautiful blue flowers. I think I have one over here. Let's see. Yeah, it seeded itself over here earlier, and just look at those blue flowers. The bees love them, so it's a great pollinator attractor. Yeah, so I'm letting that one go. It's in amongst my artichokes, which are really coming along now that the weather is slightly cooling off, and they'll get very large over the winter, and then they'll produce their beautiful artichokes flowers in the spring. Well, they produce artichokes, and if you don't harvest the artichokes, you get those gorgeous vibrant purple flowers that I love. Here we have some okra growing, and I had to tie those up recently because the wind had taken them down. This ghost pepper plant that only produced like 2 peppers earlier this summer, and then the heat or something made it pause. I'm hoping it comes back. It is sending out a few blossoms, so maybe it'll produce a few more. We'll see. As I mentioned, I have a lot of oregano. This particular one is doing fabulous, very full, and I'm continually coming out and cutting off branches and drying the oregano to put up for the winter. Here we have a purple TP bush bean seedling coming up, some oregano. Actually, that looks like basil. Not sure whether that's oregano or basil. We'll have to see. Walking onion. This isn't a total experiment. I had to do a ton of cuttings from my purple tree kale. One of them had, in the wind, as I did a video on damage from the wind, one of them had broken off several branches in a windstorm. And most of those I turned into little cuttings. This was one of the branches, and I thought, hey, why not? It's 95% likely it's not going to root, but might as well give it a try. So we'll see. We've got some more Egyptian walking ants coming up and a little parsley trying to come back. And that is, I think it's Rudbeckia, but I get Echinacea and Rudbeckia confused a lot. So here we have lemon verbena, which I really should take off the spent blossoms. Ooh, they smell good. This is such a great plant for tea, but also for flavoring anything with lemon that you'd like. It makes great cuttings too from the woody parts. All right, so here's my new bed, my hugelkultur raised bed mound, as I'm calling it. And in the last tour, it didn't have these rocks around the perimeter. I really like how that looks. I may eventually get little rocks 3 or 4 inches across to put in between the larger rocks, or I may plant some little kind of creeping plant like lobelia or moralisum. We'll see. I have pansies and alyssum around the 4 corners, and this is actually it's actually my second planting of the pansies, because when I planted them, when I came outside about 4 hours after planting them, something had eaten off every blossom and every leaf, leaving just twigs, little stick stems behind. So I actually got those on clearance, 4 packs for $1.49. Fortunately, I had bought 2 of them and I hadn't planted the other 4, so I just replanted. Now you might say, well, why did these not get eaten? Well, they still might. We'll see what happens. In fact, I'll show you this sad specimen. Look at that. Doesn't that look terrible? But I've learned that ugly doesn't mean dead, and I believe that that aster plant is alive and will come back and be as beautiful as it was when I planted it. But it was also a victim of what ate the pansies, and I believe that was mice. At first I didn't know, but recently we discovered a nest of mice right over here. We had a very large 8-foot long, 5 or 6 feet wide and about 4 feet high wood pile here, and we moved it to get it out of the way. I've been meaning to do that because I actually want to put a tree or 2 here, a couple of fruit trees maybe. And when we moved it, we discovered some mice had made a nest in there and dug their way under the compost fence and yeah, into my compost pile, which right now is covered in greens, basically mostly corn stalks. They're on top, but a lot of the stuff I pulled out this week, and now I need to cover that with some soil, maybe some rotted wood chips, and then that will be fine. I have a cat in there. Hey, Finn, doing her job, looking for mice perhaps. That'd be good. So I think that that's what was going on. Yeah, I think the mice got out and did that, and since I planted these the day after we got rid of the mice, I think that's why they've survived. But long term, what I've decided, whether it was the mice or squirrels or something else, oh, look at the baby lizard. You two need to move. I don't want you chasing lizards through here. Go on. Go on. Go somewhere else. Finn. Cats can be great. I love cats. We have 6 of them. Obviously, I love them, or I wouldn't have that many, although mostly it's because of my children. But anyway, but they can also be kind of a pest in your garden. So I keep an eye on them, or they'll just get in and do things they shouldn't do in my garden beds. Anyway, long term, what I've decided to do in this bed to keep pests out, whether they be squirrels, possums, mice, whatever, is to plant things that are very much known to annoy and detour pests like that. And they are very much strongly odored things, like this is pineapple sage, which I got on clearance because you can see something had been eating it, but it's fine. It will do great. They both will. They get huge. I've planted them other places and I love them. They have these deep, rich red flowers. They're perennial here, and they're going to, I'll keep them pruned, but they're going to basically cover the center of this, and they're very strongly flavored. They have very strong scents, which I actually love the smell. It smells beautifully like pineapple. And then over here, to also help with the situation, along the fence line, I'm going to alternate tomato plants, which none of these tomato plants have had a problem with the squirrels or mice or anything eating them. The only problem these tomato plants have had is they did not like how hot it was. So I might put shade cloth over them next year. But anyway, tomatoes aren't bothered by these pests, so I'm going to keep tomato planting here. But I'm also going to put pots, several pots, like 5 or 6, along the fence line that are going to have mint in them, because mint is very much known to deter things like squirrels and mice. And hopefully that will keep them, those and the tomatoes will keep them from venturing over into this bed. So what am I planning to plant in this bed? All these flowers are perennials, if they can live through, you know, the mice and squirrels and such. And then what I'm going to plant as far as vegetables go are perennials or things that I plant every year in the same spot successively. So that would be like planting garlic here. That also strongly, what is the word I'm looking for? Odorous doesn't sound right. That sounds negative. Strongly scent filled. That's wordy. I don't know what the word is. I can't think of it right now. But garlic has a very strong odor, which also is known to prevent pests like that. So I can plant those now, and then they'll be ready to harvest in May or June. And then I can plant a short season crop, something that will crop quickly, like say, radishes. Yeah, that would work. Or bok choy. That's fast growing. Something like that. So that's not perennial. So yeah, if I plant perennial, it would probably be something like artichokes, but I already have an artichoke bed. I could make it another asparagus bed. I'll see. But this year I'm going to do garlic. Now over here you may have noticed this tool. That's because the same thing that ate the flowers behind me ate what I planted here within hours of planting them. So these were Brussels sprouts that I started from seed, and then I transplanted when they were about 4 inches high. When I came out 4 hours after transplanting, every leaf was gone. So disheartening. But I covered it with the stems with tulle, and look at that. A lot of them have sent forth brand new growth. I really didn't think they would, because they were just stems, but they did. So I'm really happy I didn't just pull them up. So yeah, they're growing, and in most locations, I think there's only one that hasn't sent out new leaves yet. And this happened a while ago, probably 3 weeks ago, but they are sending out new leaves. So I'm hopeful that they can come back and actually grow some Brussels sprouts. Not that I'm going to eat them, because I don't like Brussels sprouts at all. But I have, hello chicken, but I have a child or two that like them. So I'm giving it a try and see how they do over here. I'm also going to be planting onions at the front of this bed here, and on the other side of this tomato plant over here, I'm going to plant onions. So my onions are garlic, and garlic are coming in next week, and I'm going to be planting them for spring crop. Now this tomato is actually doing fabulous right now. Lots of new green growth, lots of new yellow blossoms, and even a few tomatoes already on the plant. So yeah, as I mentioned, my tomatoes did horribly this year over here. I've ended up pulling almost all of them out. I've only left a few that have shown signs of regrowth now that it's starting to cool off. I can't really blame the plants this year. They all have been a little crazy because of the heat wave that was 110 to 115 for 3 weeks. No, it was more like 5 or 6 weeks. And then the fires, which left our skies with such smoke for so long. So whatever was eating that stuff also ate most of the radishes. So I'm going to replant that. And I had cabbage in here and they ate those, but these have come back. You can see through the tulle, the leaves. So I'm learning. I've never had to deal with something eating my plants before, but you live and learn, you know? And so I'm taking this as a challenge. And I'm going to try my experiment with mint and sage and garlic and all these smells, and you keep using my tool as that's proven effective. And yeah, it's, you know, it can be discouraging if you let it, but I've learned to not let that happen. The moment I start feeling a little discouraged, I either come up with a plan to work on that problem and try to see it as an experiment, kind of a fun challenge, or I let it go. So when things start getting really ugly around here in the fall, plants just not doing well, if I don't see a way to help it start to do well, I just pull it out and forget about it. No sense letting it bring me down. There's lots that can be good about your garden, even at this transition stage when you're going into fall and winter, or if you're in a colder climate where you're just shutting everything down. That's actually, in my opinion, maybe easier to stay cheerful because you're covering it all up, mulching it, composting, and then you're looking forward to spring, planting some flower bulbs, some garlic bulbs, that kind of thing is fun. But then you can just dream about spring. When you've got a place like this where you can actually keep growing all year, it can get a little overwhelming at times. And so what I've done in a couple of my beds is I've actually decided I'm just going to shut them down just so I don't have as much watering to do and as much what's the word? Well, I tend to want everything to do well. So if it's struggling, I'm going to want to help it do better. And I want to have more time in the late fall and winter to do other things. So with a few of my beds, I am going to mulch them and let them just rest until spring. And in the other beds, I'm doing crops that I find really easy and fun. So I'll show you some of those. So this was my melon bed, totally empty of melons now. Gave me so many melons. Fabulous bed. It really worked well. I'm going to plant melons here again in the spring. But for now, what I've got is carrots. Let's see if you can see them coming up. They are throughout the bed coming up and looking good. And I will have to thin a little bit because I just eyeballed this and I can see in some places more than one has come up. But in some places I did a pretty good job. So I'm pleased with that. So yeah, we've got carrots in here of a couple different varieties. This is the new Kuroda carrots, which are red ones. And I have a couple different colors, some orange, yes, but also some purple. And over there I have some, speaking of purple, I think those are purple TP bush beans coming up. And there's a few more set to come up this week. And then I have some really pretty purple and orange violas. I love violas. And verbena to brighten up the winter. These are perennial flowers here in Zone 9B, and I have big flower beds elsewhere on the property, but I like incorporating flowers in my garden. Well, in the summer, I like to do it because it attracts the bees. And in the winter, I like to do it because it makes me happy. So over here is my other squash plant that's still hanging on, not looking great, but still producing some squash. Starting to have that mottled yellow-green appearance, though, that I find they take on in the late fall. But we'll probably get a few more out of it before I pull it. And then my tomato plant, which was looking like it was a goner, but now is sending out tons of new green growth and blossoms and tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes, big red ones. So I'm real happy about that. Get another round of cherry tomatoes. And this bed is super fun. First of all, I've got those tomatoes that did badly, like all the others, during the summer that were supposed to, do great in the heat, and they did not. But now look, we've got some big tomatoes. I've already taken several off of that one. And over here we've got tomatoes growing. I've already taken off several of that one. And you can just see the plant both of them look much better than they did before. They're dark green, they're getting big leaves, they're sending off new shoots, so that's great. That'll be wonderful. And then I've planted some red cabbage here, ruby red cabbage. And cabbage is a new thing for me this year. I've done a lot of kale and collards. I've done all kinds of spinaches, including perpetual spinach and New Zealand spinach and Malabar spinach. And I've done a lot of greens, but I have not done cabbage. So I have this ruby red cabbage here that I started from seed and transplanted a few days ago. We'll see how it does. I had planted parsnips here, but as I mentioned earlier, my cats kept digging them up, or something did, and they just weren't sprouting. Now I can see a few sprouts. There's one. Where did I see? There's one, and there's one over there. So they look like they're all on the edges. There's one in there. I didn't see any though here, so that's why I planted the ruby red cabbages where I did. And I'm gonna just do the parsnips elsewhere where I have never seen anything dig. So hopefully they'll do well somewhere else. Just look at all those cherry tomatoes coming on this plant that I thought I was gonna have to pull out because it looks so sorry. But right next to it, I just wanted to show you the sprouting broccoli plant. So that is sprouting broccoli. The leaves are fabulous, so delicious. You can stir fry with them. And then the little broccoli heads, little miniature broccoli heads are so great. And you harvest them like I'm going to with these today and then just keep growing more. Now, this does look a little lopsided, and that's because this plant was broken. Because right here, there was a big zucchini plant and the wind blew it onto the sprouting broccoli and broke a branch off. A branch that came out of here went straight up real tall. So I planted that elsewhere, took a lot of the growth off and all the broccolis, of course, and I'm hoping it comes back. Even though it's unlikely, you know me, I always will try. And here I've got some sprouting broccoli coming up, purple sprouting broccoli, so different than this variety, and we'll see how that goes. So this bed is right next to the amaranth bed, as I used to call it when that amaranth was huge. And in both of them, I'm resting the western half of the bed. There is a yellow pear tomato there in the corner, and I can't really move that one because it's rooted into the bed, gone through the holes of that pot and into the bed the way it was intended to. And now that it's cooling off, it's actually starting to produce quite a bit of tomatoes on it, so I'm going to leave that. But the rest of it, it's got hay, spent hay, with some sheep manure scattered throughout it, which is a coal manure, so you can put it directly on vegetables, which is why it was there. And I'm going to get some more of that and cover both these beds here with it. And here I've got some rudbeckia I planted at the end, and I've got a couple of plants, a few, what is it, 5 that are doing well or just starting. That's a Merritt collard cutting that's coming along just fine. And here we have a nice okra and another okra over there, and then that is an Armenian cucumber. As you can see, actually I need to harvest that one, and draped it with tulle because I found that basically pests really love cucumber leaves. So this has worked really well to let this plant grow, and you know, it doesn't have to be fully covered to do well, because get a couple of those leaves out of there, because just having the tulle around it seems to deter things from getting in there and eating the leaves and eating the cucumbers. So I've harvested probably a dozen cucumbers that size off of that plant in the last 2 months. We'll see how long it keeps going. So I've got Swiss chard going on here. That's the young stuff. It's looking really good and healthy, and it's so delicious. This was my experiment one. You can see the trunk on that. And now it's got tons of new growth coming from the bottom, but also out of the larger stem, we have lots of new green growth coming, green and red. And those are just wonderful. If you haven't tried Swiss chard, you should. It's really, really good. So I've got a lot of okra in here that I've been cutting back, and there's lots of new okra volunteers coming up, as well as zinnias everywhere. But what was in this bed, I have now cut back to only one stem. So here is the base of, that's quite a base, of the pumpkin plant that was in here. And that's right there. I just cut off this morning. That's the 5th pumpkin. The first 4, 1 was about that size, 3 were bigger. And so that's the 5th one. And then it grew, since 2 weeks ago, it grew this other one here. So that is the only vine I left. This was, you know, the vines went over to the zinnia bed, and it went over in between those 2 beds. It was all the way out here in the walkway. It had covered all the zinnias and okra. That one pumpkin plant really took over. So I cleared that out. Yeah, so I'm just going to let the okra and zinnias go and just kind of leave that. Otherwise, I'll mulch it with some straw or hay. Now down here on my patio, I have all kinds of little things going on. And one of them I thought I'd show you is this Roma tomato plant that grew all summer but never produced a single tomato. And suddenly I come out here and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 that I can see right away. 13 tomatoes. I'm like, what's up? This is like the sparsest tomato plant I've ever seen. and it's growing tomatoes. So, okay, I'm going to give it some compost tea and keep it watered, but not too much. And maybe it's just going to enjoy this slightly cooler weather we're having. I mean, 89 to 93 is a lot cooler than 115. And though those skies are not blue, they are far from the gray, brown, or red we've been having for the last 6 weeks. So yeah, maybe it's actually going to do well now. I spy a strawberry. That looks like a breakfast strawberry, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely. I'm going to eat this now. The merit tree collards are all looking super good right now. I pulled them out from the shade into the sun a little bit because I think they can take it now, especially since it's not too hot. Yep, they all look great. Merit collards, purple tree kale, just any collards and kale, I highly suggest. Well, my experience has only been with the tree kale and tree collards, but I highly suggest you try cuttings with them because they root so easily. You don't have to do rooting hormone. You don't have to put them in water. You just stick them in the dirt and they almost always take. So cool. Can you see the purple lady bok choy coming up? I've planted that in here. And more purple lady bok choy. That grows super fast, so I'm looking forward to eating more of that. So the lantana and the walking onions and the garlic chives and purple salvia and purple fountain grass, all looking pretty and good. Down here we've got some tequila sunrise dahlias and some Mexican heather. All looking pretty. Your garden can look pretty in the fall. So you might have noticed that the lighting looks a little different in different clips on this tour. Very observant of you. That's because I took most of the tour last night around 6 p.m. And then I took, most of the rest of the tour this morning around 9:30, 10:30 a.m. And now I'm shooting this because I wanted to give you guys a look at these gorgeous gazanias when they open at about 5 p.m. today. Usually I do the tour all in one go, all within an hour. But yesterday evening I just wasn't feeling the best, and so I cut out a little early and finished up this morning. That's also why you might have noticed that my hair looked different. Those of you who are really observant, I started the tour with it up, and in different clips throughout it, you've seen it down in pigtails. But really, it's all been done within a 24-hour period, so it's an honest reflection of the garden here at the beginning of October. I should probably cut off these peppers and use them for cooking tonight. Maybe along with this lemon cucumber and this, I gotta show you this that I just pulled off this morning. This little baby butternut squash. Literally, it's the length of my hand. It's a butternut squash. What the heck? So sunny or hazy, morning or evening, the garden goes on. Simple living here in October in Northern California. I hope that wherever you are, you're enjoying the beginning of fall too. This never gets old. Running water makes them so happy. And mud. Mud makes them happy too. Bye for now, everyone. Go outside and enjoy nature. It's all around you. You might have to travel a little bit, but you'll be able to find something beautiful and something fun to explore, even if it's in your own backyard.